Sasic, and I'm with Next Best Picture. Halina, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for your time. I had the privilege of seeing this film at the Venice premiere, and it certainly was one of the films that I was looking forward to the most, just because I am quite a big fan of your work. So it's just very special to be able to speak with you today.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for coming and seeing the movie in Venice. I really appreciate that.
Oh my goodness, what a pleasure. Um, having known your work, it seemed like when I read the description of this film that it was kind of the perfect marriage of instinct and bodies, 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 both with, of course, its themes of female desire and sexuality, and then the sheer comedy and the force of that you get to put in. Is that kind of how you viewed Baby Girl as well, as kind of a marriage of those two?
Yes, definitely. And I'm very glad that you see it that way. And that, yeah, I definitely see it like that. When I did Bodies, I discovered humor and I thought it was amazing. And humor is such a beautiful sort of weapon to use when you want to talk about darker themes like, female liberation or sexual desire. And I think humor is what connects us all and makes it very relatable. And that's why it was very important to us that we would have this tone that was fun, even though we're addressing, even though there's, elements of a thriller, there's tension, we also really wanted to have fun with it and just show how sexuality is also very vulnerable and how sexuality can feel very performative at times when you have the courage to try new things, or it can be very scary and it can bring a lot of nerves. And that's why we thought it was very important to have humor in our movie.
And maybe some people would have thought that going from your first feature film which was quite intense, it's not
Yes.
a lighthearted film in any
No.
way, to to switching to comedy, that would be, such an extreme, but it seems like for you it kind of felt like the natural way to kind of dive into some of those topics.
Well, for me, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. So Instinct is, of course, a very radical art house film. My first feature, my debut. It's about a therapist who falls in love with the rapist that she's treating in jail, and it was based on a true story. It was super dark. We made it in the Netherlands for government money, and it got a lot of international attention. And then when I did Bodies, Bodies, which was a horror originally, it had a killer in it. And then when we came up with the idea, what if there's no killer? What if the whole movie is about group behavior? And it's all about the question, is the beast inside of us or is the beast outside of us? And that then gave me such a huge key into the story. And because that is a topic that I'm obsessed with and I'm fascinated with, and these friendships that became very toxic under pressure. I just really, really love to tell that story. And then taking all of that new experience and being in a new country, America, and getting the freedom from A24 to really think of a movie that I wanted to create from scratch and write myself. Yeah, I could bring all the things that I learned while doing Instinct and Bodies and bring it to this project.
You love psychology. You love diving into the human psyche.
Yes, I love the human psyche and I love to study human nature in its essence and then bring radical honesty to that. So instead of creating Walt Disney characters like, okay, look at women that are now so strong. I don't find that interesting at all. For me, true feminism is that I can create female roles that have all these different layers that are amazing at some things, but are also weak and vulnerable and have sexual desire and maybe have rage and have all these different types of characteristics that I would always be watching in the wings when I used to be a stage actress, watching men. They could portray roles like Macbeth and Richard III, and I was always dreaming of roles like that are way darker. And I didn't want to play Ophelia. I thought that was really boring. Like a virgin goes from in 5 scenes from a virgin to killing herself in some lake, and that's all she has to do. And in the meantime, the men were asking to be or not to be, and I was like, I want to ask these existential questions. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I created Romy as kind of like a big female role where you can really show your full range and go into areas that are scary and that you're nervous about. And in a kind of like a movie that hopefully entertains people, and keeps them at the edge of their seat because the tension is there, and we have unpredictable and fun twists and turns. But underneath it all, there's an existential crisis. And that's why I think Nicole Kidman is so amazing in this movie, is that she can really show everything that she learned in all of the years that she had this amazing career, and she can now bring to this role. So a lot of people are telling her, "Oh my God, you're so courageous," but she always says, "Yeah, but later in life as a woman, you don't get a lot of material sent to you where you can actually really create an arc like that. And that's why a lot more female filmmakers should get the space to tell their stories.
And I mean, going off of that, I love that this year in particular we have gotten so many films focused on women, some older women,
Yes.
and and just being very unapologetically real and showing what they want at this stage in their life. And I love that you are part of this group that has brought these stories to life. I guess, is there a reason why we're seeing that? I feel like I know a little bit, but maybe some other people don't. I would love to hear from you, why we are getting these stories.
Well, because we just got the right to vote. You know, it was 1987 when women still had to bring a male guardian to a bank to get a business loan. So that is literally last week. So we were nowhere yet. You know, this is just the very, 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 very beginning of what we can do and what we want to do. But luckily, it is an exciting time. Things seems to be changing a little bit, and that's why we now see this story with Pamela Anderson at the heart of it, which is so exciting. And then Demi Moore, and we see Nicole Kidman, and they're all doing their best work later in life. And I think, I mean, it's very interesting, but it's also something that should have happened earlier, but it's happening now. And of course, Nicole is someone who had such an insane, amazing career that everybody who was part of this movie was like pinching themselves to even believe that she would attach to the project. But and now she's fully in it, and she's telling this story, and I couldn't be more proud of her.
I mean, what a dream to be able to work with her and Harris Dickinson for this film. I'm curious, as you were writing the film and thinking of who could possibly be in these roles, did you have Nicole and Harris in mind, or did that come later through the process?
No, I first wrote the entire script, and then we started casting. And Nicole came to the project early on because she read a very early draft. She found me actually after I did Instinct. She really said, "I want to work with you." She saw that movie. And so we already had a bond. And then I just went off to write this. And then she read a very early draft and immediately said, "I want to do that." So that was, of course, the first moment when I couldn't believe it. I was so happy because, of course, I knew it wasn't an obvious story. There were elements of taboo in my story. And her really attaching herself to that in that way, yeah, that was really a very, very special moment for me. But then the next question, the next day, I remember us on the phone being like, okay, so who's going to play Samuel? Who's, in the story, her intern, and who has to, stand his ground and really be a strong opposite her, also play very vulnerable, but also be able to dominate her in the intimacy scenes. And so that week, I accidentally saw the premiere of Triangle of Sadness, and I immediately
Mm.
thought, oh my God, who's that? And then checking out his earlier work, I was just in awe of his talent, and I thought he could do it. He has humor, he has a lot of technique as an actor, which you need for my movie, and he has a very special presence that is this very interesting form of masculinity and ability to be vulnerable at the same time.
Mhm. I I'm certainly not one who is afraid to admit that I have a bit of a crush on Harris, and I kind of love how he gets to just change and become a new person with each role. Was I'm curious with them two getting to work together. As I was rewatching the film a little bit yesterday, it's amazing the tension that you get to build through the writing, through the shots that we see in here. Um, is that I guess what was key in some of those scenes is those early ones when we are just seeing their characters and getting to know a little bit more about them before obviously they get together as seen in my background. What did you want most from both of those actors in order to convey this passion between them?
Well, in a way, my movie is a fairy tale. My movie is a true love story. Two people are falling in love, and that is always something you have to think about, like because we've seen it a million times in so many different stories. And so, to create an original story that feels authentic and fresh and modern, you really have to think about all the different moments of like, how are we going to create that electricity? And that starts with
Mhm.
casting, of course. You want a certain chemistry between two people that is unexpected and that is really, seducing you to go on the journey with them. And so in the first scene that they actually really talk is the cookie scene. and where she says, "Hey, go make a cup of coffee for me." And
Yeah.
then she asks him, "How did you get that dog to calm down?" Because in the streets they ran into each other coincidentally, and he calms a dog down that tries to attack her, and that's of course a metaphor. That's of course a very much a fairy tale moment, right, where we really introduce him in this like magical way almost. And then this particular scene, this cookie scene, he immediately tells her that she shouldn't drink coffee after lunch, which is a very fatherly thing to say for a young man. And so I think they discover from that moment something in each other that is opposite of what they present to the outside world. She presents as a very strong, she's on top of that of the food chain. She's the CEO of the company. So, and he's the intern. So he's the lowest of the company, the lowest ranks. Yet in that scene, he's acting fatherly, and she has this moment of vulnerability, almost like a glitch. Like she comes up to him saying, "Hey, go make me a cup of coffee." But then when he tells her not to drink that much coffee, she immediately is a little bit caught off guard, and that's when she's intrigued and when she, wants to know more. And then he says, "Well, I offered the dog a cookie. Do you maybe want one?" And that's when we kind of set up the comedy of it all and also their sexual dynamic. And that is how we talked about every scene, like where are we in the story? How close are they? And that goes from how are they physically towards each other? How are we gonna hold our body in this scene, how we're going to do the blocking, and also what are they saying and what are they not saying to each other.
Mhm. And I mean, of course, when we do finally get into the throes of this relationship, I certainly think it's one of the more steamy and erotic films that we've seen in recent years. I'm sure, of course, getting the scene ready for all of that is always a little difficult, a little tense. How do the three of you kind of navigate scenes such as that, especially when with Nicole's character, so much of our viewpoint and what we see is on her and her pleasure, which is, it's important to see that again, as we've been speaking about earlier. We don't get to see those kinds of viewpoints. But I suppose, just crafting all of those scenes together, what goes into the process with all of that?
For me personally, it's much more difficult to direct a very emotional scene where there's a lot of emotional transitions and people have to say a lot of words. That's way more complex than to direct an intimacy scene, because you have an intimacy coordinator, everybody's super prepared, everybody knows exactly what's going to happen, and we choreograph it in a way that is very clear. So there's on days like that, there's the most clarity on set, just like when you do a fight. When you do a fight, you cannot leave anything, open, because it's dangerous. You can actually hit each other or touch each other, and you don't want that. And the same goes for intimacy scenes. Those days are actually sometimes the easiest because everybody's so well prepared. And so and scenes that are emotional can be for an actor way more embarrassing and scary to do because it's just a difficult level of acting. But of course, the audience is
Mhm.
often very intrigued by these intimacy scenes because they feel very electric. And I think for us, we really wanted to bring something new. We are playing with cliches a little bit in the beginning, and we're playing with the expectation of the audience, like, okay, this is going to be a thriller like we know from the 90s, like Indecent Proposal or Fatal Attraction or 9.5 Weeks. And then we go in a very different direction. And what we want to bring to those sex scenes is humanity, is the fact that
Mhm.
sexuality can feel very, it's scary. It's a little nerve wracking, and it's also hot and
Uh,
steamy, of course. But
Yes.
I think a scene is way more sexy when you bring humanity to it, and when you really bring all the steps, and you really show the shyness of people, even if they want to try this kind of like sub dom dynamic, they are not good at it. They're finding it out as they go, and that makes it super relatable. And Harris and Nicole are both not only amazing actors, but also they're comedians. So we bring a lot of
Yeah.
humor to it as well. And in those scenes in those hotel rooms that are very long scenes, they really get the time to kind of explore each other. Yeah, I think those are the best scenes of the movie, and I'm very proud of them, and mainly proud of my actors, who were able to really bring that electricity and really make it hot and sexy.
And you're right. I mean, as I watch those scenes, of course, it is very sexy, but I find the fumbling around and the, oh my gosh, what are we doing? This is so silly. I find those human elements just so much more intriguing, and it just feels real because it's never a perfect moment when two people are getting very intimate with each other. And I love that you included that in the film. I know
Yes,
that
thank you.
of course maybe you've already been asked this question, but I do know that a lot of people, within this year and last year, they've said that they find sex scenes so unnecessary in films. And I like that your film puts an emphasis on that. It was that, what do you kind of think of that type of conversation?
I think there was a study that, what does even a study say? But there was a certain study, and it appeared in different outlets about young people not wanting to see any sex scenes, and they prefer friendships. I totally agree with them. I don't like myself at all sexual acts in your face. I think if you actually look at my movie, there's almost none of that. There's like two little snippets of actual sex. The rest is all suggestion. And for me, real, true eroticism is the suggestion, because it's all in your head. It's a story. So we have one scene where he orders a glass of milk for her and she drinks it, and it's in an amazing and very sexual scene, but they don't even touch. And so I
Yes.
very much understand that that is how people would like to consummate, movies. For me personally, sensuality really comes from your own imagination. And if you can use your own imagination, you can really make it personal to you. And so it's very interesting with my movie that people are very much talking about, oh my God, it's so sexual and it's so hot and it's so steamy. And I love that. I'm only very grateful. But if you look at it closely, it is all about how people are taking their own personal, fantasies or their own personal hang-ups to my film, and they have to use their own brain to sort of finish whatever we're suggesting, because a lot of it takes place in the wings, and it's all about a mind game way more than a physical game.
I know you said that sometimes shooting the steamy scenes end up being the easiest and the emotional ones are sometimes the hardest. I'm very curious then, what was the hardest scene to film? Because we do get a lot of emotions high in the film, especially toward the end.
Yeah, I think one of the very difficult and complex scenes in the movie is the confession scene, we call it. It's a scene between the husband and the wife where she finally tells him, what she did, or at least she tries to tell him. And especially what she tries to tell him is what's underneath it all, the shame that she has about her own kink. And that was a very difficult scene. It's a very long scene. We made it very simple in the blocking, as I love, because I always want it just to be about the actors and not have a complex block. So they're just sitting down opposite each other, and it's a very relatable scene, because we've all gone through relationships in which you're scared to lose the other one, or someone cheated, or you're jealous, or whatever, and all of that comes to the table. And there's a lot of emotional transitions in that. And I think both of them did the most. I don't want to give away too much, but I think they are so good in that scene. But it was everybody, we were all like dreading it a little bit, being nervous about it. And then on the day, it just worked so perfectly. But those are the scenes that are actually most challenging for actors.
I agree. And again, amazing cast, including Antonio Banderas in this film. I wanted to ask you one more question, and that is about some amazing music that is in this film, including Dancing on My Own, Father Figure. Did you get to choose those songs? Because if you did, you have the best music taste possible.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, father figure, I knew I wanted in the movie before I started writing, even because I knew I wanted to create something about sexuality and control and power and hierarchy. And I think all of that is in that song. And I thought it would be so funny to see a younger man and an older woman together. And the power dynamic on paper is she's the one in power, he's the one without. But in the song, it kind of like swaps, because he's the father, and then he's holding her. But on the other hand, she's also the daddy and he's underneath her. And so you kind of like don't know anymore who holds the power over who. And I think that's what makes it very sexy. And that song has so many layers, and it just is the perfect world for them to move around in that luxurious hotel room. And then there's the In Excess song in it too. So I kind of wanted to divide the needle drops, as we call them, between her world, and songs from her youth and childhood, and then songs that Harris and Esme, her assistant, and her daughter, played by Esther McGregor, their world, and they have their own songs, the music of the rave, for instance, and all of that.
And you knew what you were doing, giving us Harris Dickinson shirtless. You were sneaky. Well, Halina, I just want to thank you so very much for your time. It was a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun. Thank you. Thank you for your beautiful questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good